Hey, good morning to those of you on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast. I'm curious in the chat in a minute if you're hearing my warnings. We got a nuclear power plant somewhere nearby, and the sirens are going off, and I think they're going to go up for a little bit. But it's actually not as loud as the jets that fly overhead, so I think we're doing good. Cody, good to hear that you're excited about today's event. I'm just going to line up a couple of things I want to share so I can talk to this pretty well. Let me get rocking and rolling here. Okay, perfect. And let me turn off this caption thing, get us going. Before we get started, I'm trying to get in this habit of giving an extra tip in the beginning for people who show up on time or a little bit early, which I really appreciate. So today's tip is about the 80-20 rule. You probably have heard of this rule over and over again. And I just want to bring it back again, because it's important for us to remember. The 80-20 rule that I want to share is basically 20% of your efforts will lead to 80% of your results, right? 20% of your customers might lead to 80% of your headaches. 20% of your customers might lead to 80% of your revenue. This 80-20 rule out there, and one thing I'd like to encourage you to do, I'm just getting myself lined up here. One thing I'd like to encourage you to do as it relates to the 80-20 rule is just look at your day. Look at it today and say, am I working on the 20% or am I working on the 80%? I have to ask myself this every day, right? There's a lot of stuff I'm doing. I have my regular job that does the revenue side of the house that we all know is important. I've got all this training I'm doing with my team, the GovCon chamber work that we do, which is all volunteer type work. I've got different activities, like, I don't know if you see, wrong place, right there, that side. That's a whole new 21 new ideas of training that I want to do for you that'll help with business development and capture within the government space. And so I'm looking at that side. I'm no good with my fingers here, but I'm looking at that whiteboard and that stuff I put down. I said, that's the 20%. If I work on that, that'll deliver 80% of the results that I want, like 80% of the lessons I'm hoping to teach you, plus also, I think 80% of the benefits. So keep that in mind as you're moving forward, is the 80-20 rule. Make sure you're working on the 20% that's the most important. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonnell. I am the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I'm excited to welcome you here to my daily LinkedIn Live federal sales training in the government space. I spent 20 years as a small business owner in the federal market, running into many of the same challenges you guys run into, whether you're running the business, you're doing capture or business development. And since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. When we follow the process, we're going to achieve the results we expect to have. I like to call it predictable, repeatable results. That's what you want. And that kind of is what drives me to teach what I teach and my team to put together what we put together. Before I get too far, do me a favor, help buyers and help me and help the people in the community. Remember who you are. Put your company name and your core competency, 2 or 3 words that describe what your company does. Put that in the chat so we know who you are and what you're doing. Also, as long as we're going forward here talking about your company and your core competencies, if you're a HubZone firm, put that in. A woman-owned small business, or a service-disabled veteran-owned, or an 8A, put that in. Those are the 4 small business programs that sometimes have the set-asides. And if we get buyers coming through the comments, I'd like them to be able to see your company, what your core competency is, and also what you do. Finally, I wanted to say thank you very much to our sustaining members. The GovCon Chamber of Commerce sustaining members are the ones who make all this possible. We put out a directory. I think this week we're putting out our new SBLO directory. That's the Small Business Liaison Officer for large firms. And so we're putting these directories out. We put this training out, and all of this is courtesy of the sustaining members. So thank you very much. Okay, today we're going to tackle, I think you already saw the topic. That's why you're here, right? The no proposal way to make $1 million in the federal space. And I'm going to drive pretty quickly in here. If you haven't been to my training before, I move at a fire hose pace. And today is so much more of a fire hose because I really want to give you some actionable things to be thinking about, actionable steps you can take at the end of this training to try out what I'm suggesting here. And there's no gimmicks here. When you look at this, you're going to go, I hadn't thought of that. It's not like it'll be in some disbelief. I'm not trying to get you to suspend belief, your belief systems to figure out the no proposal way. I'm just saying, sometimes you have to write a proposal to win a contract and participate on a contract, and sometimes you don't. And today I'm talking to you about how can you get any kind of revenue, $1 million, $100,000, or $10 million by following a no proposal approach. This shouldn't be your only approach. This should be one more channel towards the revenue goals that you have, one more path that you'll follow. So we're going to get started in here. I will tell you that jumping to the chase, because I love getting to the meat of what we're going to talk about, is that really what I'll be telling you is that you want to be teaming up with companies that have already been awarded contracts, so prime contractors. So if you're one of those people who are looking for the, hey, what's he going to say? I won't make you wait till the end. That's what I'm going to talk to you about. I'm going to talk to you about why, and a little bit of what we experience, and then I'm going to end up with how you can make this happen. And I'm really excited about it because I truly believe that you could make $1 million if you're in an average space, right? 100,000 if you're just getting started, or 10 million if you're a $30 million, $40 million company. You could easily be making $10 million following this process that I'm talking about. So just to get started, I want to talk a little bit about, I was trying to decide, do I call it myths or just beliefs? And basically I was just laying down on how we see traditional federal government business development / capture, right? I was talking to somebody this morning, and in the federal space, there's just sales. We all do sales, right? And sales is made up of a couple of different components. People might describe it a little differently, but sales is made up of business development, which is building relationships and identifying opportunities. Capture, which is learning more about the opportunity and preparing yourself for proposals and shaping the opportunity. So business development, capture, and then proposal. And proposal is writing your response to the government. All three of those are just sales. It's different stages of the sale. And so I wanted to talk about a couple of truisms on how we see the federal market. You may have heard people say, you may have heard me say, it takes 6 to 24 months for you to identify an opportunity, go through the capture activity, and win it, and then wait for it to start, right? So there's this long phase. And I don't want to go too far in what that is, but most of us see government contracting, federal government contracting, as this long life cycle. And it is for the most part. For the most part, if you're actually doing capture, right? Not waiting for the RFP to drop and then responding. But if you're actually doing capture, where you're trying to shape the requirements, if you're trying to shape the acquisition approach, 6 to 24 months is normal. And the bigger the contract is, the longer it'll take. The earlier you get started, the longer it'll take. I guess that's pretty obvious there, right? And so it'll take you a while is our traditional way of thinking that. And certainly when you're trying to really capture something, really shape it to your company's benefit. Another myth or way of looking at this, and I think it truly is a myth, that when teams are formed, you might believe this, other people believe it for sure. When teams are formed, there's no room for you, right? We think to ourselves, well, they got together, company A and company B and company C, D, and E got together, and they agreed during capture that they wanted to work together, signed some NDAs, and they signed some TAs. They worked together on capture, trying to push things around, and then they got into proposal, and they all took data calls and wrote their sections of the proposal, working really hard to win, and then the contract was awarded, right? We think to ourselves sometimes that there's no room for us, and that's just not accurate. Sometimes you might get there and there's no room for anybody in there. And sometimes you get there and there's room for you. An example might be, say company A teams up with company B, but then company B's in reality not able to deliver. Or maybe the two companies got together, but the government threw something on that was a little different that might be in your sweet spot, right? And so by being in there, when they have a need, they'll add you to the team. There's nothing stopping them from adding you to the team. I call it unnamed teaming partner. If you think about a contract vehicle, hey, I want to get on the 8A Star Street contract vehicle as an unnamed teaming partner. It just means, really all it means is you let me know about the 8A Star Street opportunities coming down. And if you and I can see a fit where I can help out on one of the opportunities, then you'll put me on as a subcontractor to that task order. So I'm not really on the contract vehicle, and hence the reason I call it an unnamed teaming partner. But same thing with task orders. Some task orders are sufficient size where there definitely is room for you. People aren't able to hire as fast. One of the big concerns larges have about smalls is that they'll team up with a small, and then the small won't be able to staff up. They'll struggle finding folks. I mean, even the worst thing is they'll go back to the largest, asking the largest to help them staff. And so what largest look for is small as they can staff. Well, if you're able to come in and there's a need that this team might have, then the opportunity is there. There's room for you to come in and have the door. And so the last thing I want to talk about as it relates to just some ways we see making money in the federal space is I describe making money, making revenue in the federal space happens three ways. You can either subcontract under a small, which is the first thing you should be doing when you get into the federal government space. Second thing you should be doing in my order, is priming with agencies. So you can sub under a small, you can prime with an agency. And then when you have those experiences, the third way is you can subcontract under a large. All three of those ways are designed in that 6 to 24 month range. We're trying to talk about a pipeline. We're seeing opportunities. We're seeing what fits for you, what fits for me. And as you go forward, though, you're still chasing an opportunity. You still have that long window. But there is this, not a fourth way, but another layer to those three ways of making money, which is subcontracting on existing contracts instead of subcontracting on new opportunities. Yes, I want you to go after new opportunities. Yes, I want you to have a pipeline that you work to develop into a win for you. But you should also have a level of effort that you're putting into 2023, for example, of how can I go after money on contracts that have already been awarded. So let's talk a little bit about that. And, what do I really mean when I say no proposals? So, okay. So by the way, when I get down here, if you understand what I was just talking about, some of those myths, do me a favor, just let me know you're following along by putting sooner is better, right? 6 to 24 months sounds good to be able to get a contract if you can win, but the sooner you can get it, the better. So put sooner is better in the chat. Just let me know you're following along. And I want to go into, what is the no proposal way of making $1 million in the federal market, or making $100,000 if you're less prepared, or making, $10 million. You certainly can make $10 million. I personally think that any size company should be looking at this as an option. So what is the no proposal way? I'm in no particular order. I just want to share some thoughts about it. But fundamentally, you're going after awarded contracts, right? The typical way we go after a contract wins is by identifying an opportunity and pursuing it. That's the typical way. The no proposal, and so at the end of that effort is writing a proposal that you hope that will win, right? And so the no proposal way is going after an awarded contract. It's already been awarded out there. The government has already gone through all the trouble with your peer firms out there, and they've awarded somebody that contract. And the cool thing about going after an awarded contract, and this is where it really you should be focusing on this, is that the need is immediate. When you go the traditional path and you're looking at a new opportunity, there's no immediate need. We're looking 6 to 24 months out, right? And so the need is not immediate. But when you have an awarded contract, the need is immediate. And what I mean by it's immediate is the government has awarded that contract to the prime. The prime has a responsibility for delivering on whatever they promised and whatever the team has promised. If they begin to have a challenge delivering, and you're able to come in and help, you're addressing an immediate need, a need I have today, not a need I'm thinking about long-term. And so that's a good one. And the money is immediate and approved, right? So if I'm looking at a proposal and or an opportunity, I'm doing capture, at some point the funding hasn't even fully been locked down. But once the funding's locked down, until it's been obligated or awarded, right, it still is not immediate. It's not here yet. But when you go to an existing contract, that money is there. So there's a need for you and there's money to pay you, right? Doesn't mean you're going to get it. And we'll come to that in a second. But somebody can fill that need and somebody can get that money because it's all done on an awarded contract already. I want to show you this one bell curve. And this is really important for me if you haven't seen it before. So this bell curve, it's a technology adoption bell curve, but it basically follows the same premise. And what I want to just point out is that you see how the bell curve goes from the left and has innovators, 2.5%, all the way over to the right, which is laggards. And what this means is innovators will do whatever you ask if you just show up. 2.5% of the people are going to say yes instantly, no matter what. And over on the right, 16% of the people, no matter how great it is, even if the golden goose spit out dollar bills from the front, they would still say no because they're just resistant. There's no problem with that. That's just life. Some will, some won't. So what is what I like to say, right? And the reason I point out the bell curve is I really want you to pay attention to the right-hand side. When you're reaching out to awarded contracts, when you're going to do some of what I tell you, don't try to aim for wins everywhere. Don't try to get everybody to like you or everybody to work with you. You're really just trying to get the 2.5%, maybe the 13%, which is early adopters. If I give you a quick little example of the difference between innovators and early adopters, if you think about the next new iPhone, innovators sleep in tents or wait in line overnight to get the next phone. Early adopters go get a Starbucks coffee, then come in on Monday morning, right? So they're both committed, but one's going to wait a little bit. And so you're targeting really that 2.5%. And when you keep that in mind, the amount of people you reach out to, not all of them are going to work with you. You're just trying to get 2.5%. And if that 2.5% leads to dollars, that's a good day, right? So always keep that bell curve in mind. In fact, do me a favor, in the chat, just put bell curve rocks to let me know that you understand this idea of the bell curve. Some will, some won't, so what, right? So bell curve rocks in the chat. And then let me keep coming down this idea of what is the no proposal way. One thing I want you to keep in mind, because I heard somebody tell me this story, and I hadn't heard that this was the experiences some of either you or your peers out there in the industry have had. But when I talk about going on a no contract award and going subcontracting with existing primes, et cetera, I'm not talking about W-2ing, becoming an employee. I'm not talking about 1099, becoming a quasi-employee. I'm talking about subcontracting, just true subcontracting. If you reach a company and they're not doing that, then they're not the company for you, right? They're part of the some won't. And so keep in mind, this whole no proposal way of winning money, to me, it's all about subcontracting under an existing contract. And I'm going to talk to you in a minute about how do you do that. Okay, so one of the things that I thought was just so cool, and it's something to keep in mind. Remember, I said 2.5% on that bell curve. If you looked at the top 5 IT companies in the federal space, so the top 5 companies in the federal space winning IT contracts, those 5 companies currently have 16,204 open jobs as of this training. So today's, let's say, December 5th. I was going to say any old day, but it is December 5th. 16,000 open jobs. Not all of those are even remotely in your space, right? But maybe 2.5% of them, maybe 5 or 10 of them are in your space. And that's a lot. Imagine if the top 5 IT companies have 16,000 open positions, how many are the top 100 companies going to have? Right? A ton. The average large business has thousands of open jobs at any given point. And they're not all SharePoint jobs. They're not all artificial intelligence or cybersecurity or ServiceNow, right? But there's some in there. You don't need them all to be that way. You need some to be in there, and you need them to have an immediate need, right? And so a lot of open positions there. One thing I want you to keep in mind as it comes back to how do I make $1 million, before I get kind of wrap up on the how steps that I want to give you. How do you make $1 million? It's really important, and I teach people this, that you need to know your numbers. You need to know what does it take to make $1 million. If you have people in your company who are doing billable work on contracts, then you should know your average billable rate. So let's say it's $100 an hour. For any person you put with the government on a contract as a subcontractor or prime, anybody you put out there, your average rate is $100 an hour. If you multiply that by the 2,000 hours or so that people work, so double it, then you have the revenue you make every year. So if you have a full-time equivalent employee, fully billable with the government at $100 an hour, they're bringing into your company $200,000. If you have 5 of those people, they're bringing in $1 million. So you need 5 people to get another $1 million. 5 people billing out full-time, right? 5 new full-time employees billable to the customer. 5 people get you $1 million. If the top 5 IT companies have 16,000 open jobs and you're just trying to find 5 open positions that you could solve, then you're going to be able to see pretty quickly that the numbers are in your favor and you just need to do the work. One of the things that I think I need to point out as a success factor for you is that you must have a core competency, right? You must be tight with your core competency, have a niche, and the ability to staff up. So I know on this training, I think we have a company who's niche is ServiceNow. ServiceNow is a huge hurdle for companies out there, larges and smalls, to hire people in the ServiceNow or to have ServiceNow expertise or to be a ServiceNow partner, right? I know I've got people in the community who are on ServiceNow. That's really attractive to the companies who might have open ServiceNow positions compared to, well, another one that I was just talking to today, her company has artificial intelligence expertise and their experience is artificial intelligence. So she's able to go into some of these primes and say, this is what we bring when her research leads her to find those. And so that caveat for you is that you must have a core competency. You must know what your niche is, and you must have the ability to hire up the people to be able to quickly go in. You're not trying to go in and be a replacement staffing firm. That's very important to keep in mind. I'm not teaching staffing. That's a model. It's a good model. It's not the model I'm talking about. I'm talking about being a subcontractor where you get on and you're part of the team. You're part of the overall solution that the contract envisioned when they put out the requirements, et cetera. And so when you have a niche, you can drive down in that. So anyways, if that makes sense, put down in the chat, niche down, N-I-C-H-E down. And I want to wrap up here with some tips on how you can actually do this, right? What can you do to go forward? And so let me just pull up my screen that's got my little cheat sheet. Okay, so I want to teach you some tips that I use that'll help you succeed in this no proposal way to making $1 million in the federal market, right? I have a workshop that I teach people this exact thing that I walk through. I'm guiding them through how to find relationships and build relationships out there with existing clients as well as with agencies that they're trying to go into. So it's exactly what I teach, but it's also something that I teach each of you. When you think about how do you go after an existing contract, here's how you do it. And let me just show you in case you haven't seen this. So the 7-step process that I teach people for making money in the federal government, it's research, targeting, and outreach is where it begins, right? Research is learning everything about an agency. Targeting is finding the right people to call, and then outreach is starting to call them, right? And after that, it leads to other stuff. I'm not talking about it at the moment, but I want you to keep that in mind, research, targeting, and outreach, because one of the first steps you're going to do is to find out where are these contracts that are out there. You want to find contracts that you wish you had won, right? So go into sam.gov, go into FPDS, go into whatever kind of tools you can get into that will show you contracts that were awarded that you wish you had won. One of the suggestions I have for you is make sure that they're all 10 million plus. Just start there for the moment. Contract wins that are 10 million plus. And when you're looking, keep in mind, it could be all ServiceNow. Let's just use that as today's example. It could be a contract that's all ServiceNow, or it could be a contract that's just referencing it. And so sometimes when you go into FPDS, if it's just a task, you probably won't find it. But if you go into SAM and you have access to PWS, et cetera, you would find it. If you use some of the fancier tools like GovWin, et cetera, you can do some searches on that as well. But either way you do it, you want to find contracts that have been awarded, and it could have been awarded a year ago. It doesn't have to just be awarded. In fact, it's almost better to wait for it to have gone 6 months at least, so that people in the teams can do their job and they can begin to find out. It's like, oh my gosh, it's hard to fill in some of these positions or something. So look inside there is one way, right? Look inside the tools. Another way, and I've done this successfully with customers, is talk to the small business specialist at the target agency or program office, command, whatever that you want to support. So an example is I had a customer who was wanting to support the Navy, and I was working closely with her, working on her visibility, her products, but she brought core competency and past performance in particular. She had that really strong, and so she had a lot of people she could move quickly to contracts. I was also talking to a small business specialist in the Navy about, hey, this person does IT, network engineering type stuff. Do you guys have any of that there? Is that something worth her coming over? Should I make an introduction, or do you guys get your IT network engineering from somewhere else? And he said, well, no, we actually do it, but we do it here. But we've awarded a really large, like 5 or 10 year contract to GDIT. They're the ones that have it. It's like, well, would you mind making an introduction to the program manager? And he said, no, I'll do that. because they're always looking for people who can help them out. And certainly they need to work with small businesses. Long story short, he made the introduction between my customer and the program manager. And so they got together, and within a short amount of time, 1 or 2 weeks, they were able to come to a teaming agreement or a subcontract where she started supporting that contract. But then he introduced her back to headquarters, and they put in place a general agreement, right? I can't remember what the term is at the moment, but a common agreement where they said, okay, here's the basics of our details. That way she could work with other projects. And that whole thing, that story, and the reason I'm telling you is because we reached out to a small business specialist. We had the relationship. We were able to talk to him. And so there's many of them around the country. We have a directory that has 1,000 of them in there. You can reach out, and they can perhaps point you in the direction of primes who might be able to use your help. They certainly would be catching wind of primes who have contracts but are struggling to staff up, right? And this is where we're talking about. So the last tip for you on this, just because time's going pretty fast, is who do you talk to and kind of how do you do this, right? The most important thing to remember is you're not trying to be a staffing company. So don't go out there with your hand out and say, give me. You want to build a little bit of relationship. And it doesn't take you a long time. A couple of meetings and you've got to start a relationship. You want to introduce your company. Let them know what you do. Hey, here's what we do. If we can help you in the future on new opportunities, that's my little tip for you. Build a relationship first, talking about how you might be able to help in the future on new opportunities. Let them know and see your expertise. And then as you're going through and having conversations with these different primes, you want to be able to be aware of the jobs they have. So here's my second tip for you, is when you've identified a company that has won a contract you wish you won, go look at their career page. In there, you'll see all the job openings. So if I go to Booz Allen, if I go to GDIT, I can see thousands of open positions. You could do the same thing with small firms, right? Don't think you have to just go to largest, but go to their job page and you'll see the jobs they're trying to put out. How long does it really take for you to go somewhere and find ServiceNow positions or artificial intelligence and machine learning, right? SharePoint. This takes a little bit of time, but it's not overly complex. And some of the people you want to keep in mind that you should be talking to is, in a small business, the owner. Find the owner right away. You can find them on DSBS. I have a whole training on that. In a large, you want to talk to the small business liaison officer. You want to talk to the program manager. If you can get introduced to that program manager of a contract, they'd be great. But you also want to talk to capture or business developers, capture managers, business developers at a large prime, and smalls when they use that title, because they'll be aware of new opportunities and ones that they have just won where maybe they're struggling to ramp up. And then the last two people, and I've done a whole training on this so you can find more in depth on this, but are contract vehicle program managers at large primes and contract vehicle contract managers at large primes. These two roles, these two people are responsible for contract vehicles. And so if task orders are coming out, they'll be aware if there's a need for small businesses to support that activity. When you're doing this outreach, when you're identifying the opportunities that you could have won, and then you're identifying the companies and the people you're going to call, you're doing what we call outreach. Always remember the bell curve, right? The bell curve says some will, some won't. And as long as you keep that in mind, you'll realize that you're going to have to get some of those people who just will say, no, I don't want to talk to you, or they won't even respond, until you start getting some of the ones who say yes. But all of this is within your grasp. And if it's something that you want to do, is to start growing your revenue faster than the 6 to 24 months, maybe in the 3 to 4 month range, then do me a favor, put no proposals in the chat. Let me know you're tracking on that. No proposals. So like I said, it's a fire hose. We're moving pretty fast. I'm going to try to do a lot more with this, put together a little training that actually might be 2 or 3 hours. And I'll just let people know when it's available out there, because this is a very quick way to go after revenue, legitimate way, if you have a niche and a core competency that your buyers can respect. Hey, if you want to work with my team, we have a workshop. It's a BD Accelerator Workshop. We'd love to work with you if your company's in the right position. Just go ahead and reach out on LinkedIn if you'd like to learn more. And remember, government contracting, it is not a secret. It's just a process. I'll see you in the next training.